The biggest story so far at the Australian Open is. Do subscribe to find out. Welcome to the All Surface Show. I am David Berger, David E.J. Berger, and this is my main man in Melbourne. He is on the grounds there, on the streets of Melbourne at least. Welcome in, Steve, Mr. Ace Breeze himself, to our first check-in. We've had one day of play-in, Steve. How are you doing? How are you handling that mentally, physically?
I am surviving. It was. Your question actually probably brings me a first question back to you. How do you find the first round being split over 3 days? I'll give you a second just to have a think about it. But I just felt like yesterday just didn't have that same kind of feel that you sometimes get, when you have a big Grand Slam, you have a big first day with just a stack of men's and women's matches. It just felt like yesterday just lacked a bit of punch for me in terms of star quality and number of matches. But anyway, that's a question right off the top. Did you have any thoughts?
Well, I think the organizers are happy because they have record crowds. So I think things are going as planned for them. I think as tennis hardos, it was a little sizzleless, as you said. And, when you have the first round over 3 days, it's going to be a little watered down. But we did have plenty of action, plenty of surprises, and some storylines that developed not just on the court, but off the court as well. I think your headline is we got to look at post-coach split. Carlitos Alcaraz, he wins in 3 against Adam Walton. And Steve, I was listening to the tennis podcast, and one takeaway for me from listening to them talk about it, which was just hearing other people talk about the match, was it was a good chance for people to see Adam Walton, which was kind of cool. I think, a lot of times we look at these early round matchups for the superstars of the sport, it's kind of ho-hum. You're not, it's nice to see them out there, but you're not getting geeked up. But it is an opportunity for the player on the other side to get some notice. So that was interesting to hear, smart people who talk about the sport talk about a player like Adam Walton. And I think the big takeaway is it was a match that happened, and now that's out of the way, and it's on. We don't have we're not waiting around for that first match anymore. I think that's the biggest takeaway from me in terms of Alcaraz and his return.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Walton definitely put up a pretty courageous fight. I think it was up a break in the second set. Obviously, had that tie break as well there. So, good on him for being able to push Carlos to, at least ask some questions of him in that first match back. But yes, as you said, life does go on. Carlos Alcaraz, without Juan Carlos Ferrero, can still win tennis matches. I think that is.
I know. I gotta say that was like leading up to first ball yesterday. I was listening to a lot of content ahead, and man, there was a lot of stuff about. I mean, you would think that JCF was on the court with Alcaraz, like step by step along the way. I'm not saying he wasn't a big part of what happened, but let's not get carried away. Alcaraz still went out and won all those matches as the player. So I was a little shocked by as I sort of stocked up my content diet, like the theories in which he was quite the puppet master. And I'm not saying he didn't have a large share of what's happened, or he doesn't have a large share of what happened, but give me a break here, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't get to chop off Carlos's right arm out the door. Like, Carlos is still pretty good at tennis. Like, I think we need to kind of just consider that for a second. But look, you also made a good point about Adam Walton, and I think we touched on it when I was talking about my joint in the last episode. A lot of Australians don't really know much about Adam Walton because a lot of his success has come outside of January, and January is where most of the eyes of the Australian tennis world, are watching Melbourne Park in particular. So great opportunity for them to be able to catch Walton. And, it was probably an impressive performance from Walton, given, some of the losses he's had in the lead up. So it was nice to see him, put up a fight there and put on a show for the Aussie crowd.
I think on the women's side, the upsets were the headlines, obviously, with Kostiuk going down and Le Mans, who was a big favorite, going down as well. Something I think going under talked about was Taylor Townsend exiting round one. Her first slam after breaking through at the U.S. Open. You read stuff online about how her career trajectory has totally changed thanks to that run. She's looking for more, and then upended round one here by Baptiste. I think that's a result she might be upset about. Obviously, you could say about any player, but I feel like Townsend probably feels like that was a winnable match.
Really contrasting emotions, I think, for Townsend. So lost to Storm Hunter in the final round of qualifying, gets the reprieve as the lucky loser an hour before Marketa Vondrousova is meant to play. She pulls out, comes in to play Baptiste, which, yes, as you say, is a very winnable first round matchup for Taylor. Just couldn't get over the line. But yeah, you mentioned some of the other upsets there. So Marta Kostyuk losing to Elsa Giacomo in 3 tiebreaks in the end. I think served for it in the second set at 5-3 and couldn't get over the line. And then I think serving to stay in the match in the third set, turns her ankle, has ended up actually tearing a ligament and is going to be out for a little while. So it's a shame to see Kostyuk's Australian campaign finish this way, given how promising it was to start. And you mentioned Lamens against Potapova. So Potapova was probably the favourite and expected to win, but Lamens was certainly the favourite to win when she was up a set and 5-1 before Potapova stormed back to take that one in 3 sets. Another interesting with Potapova was they asked the question of her afterwards. I don't know if it was Ben Rothenberg or someone else who asked the question in the press conference. So Potapova is one of the players who has changed her nationality from Russia to another country. So she is now representing Austria. And they asked her about her announcement of her changing of citizenship, where she basically copy-pasted Daria Kazatkina's Australia announcement and changed Australia to Austria. And she basically said, well, Daria said it pretty well. It wasn't really much about, just the exact same thing. But it's an interesting little space, I think, with the nationality switching of players. And we get to see Daria Kazatkina still represent Australia for the first time a little later on in round one. So lots going on the women's side. There's a big upset there with Marta Kostyuk going down, but I think there'll be plenty more of those upsets over the coming days.
Yeah, nice save with Le Mans. I misread the notes. But let's go back to the men's. Let's circle back to the men's side because we had some thrilling 5-setters, which you only get at these events. Sebastian Korda goes down to the college champion Michael Zhang, and I think he's now on the radar for people. He was obviously on the radar for, the tennis, the true tennis fans, the hardcore tennis fans, but he got some global attention after that performance, a thrilling 5-set victory. And honestly, after he goes up those 2 sets and then drops those 2, I was thinking he was probably going to lose the 5th as well. So way to hang in there. And I think if you're Sebastian Korda, it's just another disappointing tournament. And I believe he was battling some physical issues once again. He just can't stay healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you made a great point around Zheng in that 5th set in particular, because you would just, the expectation, I think, when you have, a younger player, up and coming player, win the first 2 sets and then drop sets 3 and 4, it's very hard to wrestle back that momentum, particularly against a player like Korda and a top level player. So full credit to the young American, and he's got Moutet, I believe, in the next round, who you could say hobbled to the finish line, threw in an underarm serve, I think, to finish things off, and has caused a little bit of a stir, I think, with the underarm serve combined with some comments from Todd Woodbridge about Tristan Schoolcate's approach to that match. So there's been a bit of action around that match, but a big opportunity, I think, for Zheng round 2 against Moutet.
Absolutely. And he apparently is talking about going back to school. So we'll see how his tournament and where he finishes factors into that decision on the other side of it. So I want to talk about something that I think is really special and unique to the Australian Open, and that's the French crowd. The French crowds obviously around the world, they're great at pretty much every venue, but if you get a player who's down on court 6 or court 7, like Carrion Jacques was yesterday against Emilio Nava, and then you give them that spark of life that really flipped the script on the match and gave Jacques the a little second wind to storm back and force that fifth set. And I'm like, that's a scene you're only going to get at this park, at Melbourne Park.
Yeah, and you get it with pockets of fans from all around the world. I think that's what's great about the Australian Open is, you think back, you have to go back decades now, isn't it? Marcos Baghdatis, as an example. You get these players, even Tsitsipas and Sakari, with the Greek contingent, they come and they are loud and vocal, and it's it brings another level to these matches. And particularly as I said, when a player falls behind, having that crowd support can certainly bring you back into it. I think a credit in that match that you've mentioned in particular to Emilio Nava in terms of being able to kind of resettle and really finished off that final set tiebreak strongly after being another who looked like the match was probably getting away from him through sets 3, 4, and the start of set 5.
I think the show courts get all the hype for, especially John Cain is a very vocal arena. But I gotta say, man, courts 6 and 7 there are rowdy as well and really fun. The other 5 set on the men's side was Kecmanovic Etcheverry, and Etcheverry seemed to be getting stronger. I think we did have a case of a South American player outlasting the other side as they can typically have some of the best endurance on tour. And Mio Kecmanovic not exactly known for his fitness, Steve. Not known for that, but not unfit though either. You read after the match, apparently Kecmanovic is going through it a bit. Had a family member die over the holiday, so he's a little lethargic in terms of his attitude towards tennis, but gave a fine effort, was up in that match. And honestly, Etcheverry was very lucky to come out of that, because you got a guy who's mind isn't all there, who's fading physically, and it's still 4-4 in the fifth, and you're getting opportunity after opportunity to break and not taking advantage. Still, finally he does break through, but that was some ending there for Etcheverry, I felt, because it's like on the one side you're like, wow, what an effort to get through, but then the other side it's like, wow, it's taking you this much to beat this guy. I feel like you can look at it two ways.
Yeah, it was it did feel like one of those matches that had the potential to be on the long side, I think, before the match. But yeah, Kecmanovic I thought was exceptional, particularly through sets 2 and 3. Particularly the backhand, some of the backhand returns that he was able to produce through that kind of patch were, I think there was those glimpses, and I think it did kind of draw him out a bit of, it hasn't been a great January for him. As he said, there's a lot going on. Tennis doesn't feel like it's the priority to him, that it has been, in previous years. But I think those sets 2 and 3 kind of gave us a glimpse of what he is capable of, and I don't think that level's too far away. So fingers crossed. Obviously he'll be heading home from Australia shortly to have a little bit of a break, but it'll be interesting to see where he goes, particularly with those kind of early North American tournaments, where he's had success in the past.
Let's turn the page to day 2, and I'll talk about some of the later matches and even some of day 3, as we are only about an hour, 15 minutes from first ball for day 2. So people, if they get to this point, actually might be well into the day. So let me bring this up, though. We have a lot of familiar names taking the court for the first time here, Steve.
Bit of a bigger day 2. So yeah, certainly more matches on the card here as we kind of finish off the first half of the draw and then start to work our way through the second half. So
yeah,
it just feels like today's a little bit more stacked.
Yeah, they gave Coco a first on look here on Rod Laver to start her campaign. So, we're getting one of the most famous and best players on the women's side very early today on day 2. Faye Leaks, who had a Great U.S. Open run. Let's see what he does here at the Australian Open. He's first on. John Kane. But as I said, let's look towards the bottom, or the back half of the day. We got Stan Wawrinka potentially playing his last match here in Australia. A former champion. That'll get the crowd going, I feel, Steve, on Kia Arena.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a pretty stacked little day there on Kia Arena. I think if I was heading there today, that's probably where I would be going. Just to the right of that on screen there, to Victoria Mboko versus Emerson Jones, I think is one of the clashes of round one. Going to be a tough ask for Emerson Jones, but she has an incredibly bright future. So one to keep an eye on. And, I think Mboko needs to be at her best straight away. She wasn't feeling best in that final against Mira Andreeva in Adelaide. So hopefully she's recovered there. But that's a big opportunity, I think, for Emerson Jones to, as you said, with the Australian media and tennis landscape, you need to kind of make a name for yourself in January. And this is a big opportunity for Jones to maybe do so.
I mentioned those vocal crowds in Australia. We're going to get that on both sides here for Juan Massarundolo and Jordan Thompson on 1573. That should be a really fun one as as a match in terms of play and a TV product. We should get some good crowd stuff happening in that one. Let's keep moving to the outer courts. Who we have? The Shanghai sensation Valentin Vachereau taking on qualifier Martin Daum. A lot of big serving happening later in court 5. That later start time, I think, is actually going to affect both players and what they're looking to do on the court, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really could be a pretty late start for that one. If you look at, Lerner Tien versus Giron earlier on in the day, that has the capability to be a pretty long match. Zarina Diaz against Paul Badosa there. Diaz won the Asian Wildcard playoff late last year. So, has shown herself to be, a handy player over the last couple of years when she's been able to be fit and back to her best. So interesting to see how Paula Badosa goes there off an up and down return to the tour. Your favorites, I guess, from the United Cup Elite last on court there on court 7s and on to keep an eye on late in the day. But Clara Tauson is one who probably needs to, find or regain some of that form that we saw last year. It hasn't been the best start to 2026 for the Danes. So curious to see how she goes first up as well.
If you're Hamad Medjedovic, you're not loving being first on peak daylight on court 7, where you're going to be battling the Heat and the South American fans. That's going to be, I might need to look at the current odds for that one, Steve.
It's going to be an interesting one. And the thing with Medjedovic is a little quirk in his record to date is he has never won a match that has gone 4. So when he wins in straight sets. So he'd want to get off to a good start there, I think, against Navone with the Argentinian crowd behind him. I think it's going to be a good test, I think, to see where Medjedovic is at in terms of his level, because he has started 2026, strongly. He put together some strong performances, making his way through qualifying and going deep in Auckland. But this is that test now of back to the best of 5 format on a warm Melbourne day against a very capable player. It's going to be a really interesting match to watch.
I want to pivot back. I want to pivot back to the main show courts here, Laver, Court, and Kane, because I think I'm bearing the lead. In which, what a night card on Laver with Swiatek followed by Djokovic. I think the women's match has a chance to be a little bit more competitive for fans, but Rachel Martinez, I think, has some form as opposed to last year going into this match. So maybe only drawing like 99% dead in this matchup, but still some bang for your buck here on Laver.
Yeah. And he comes in with, coming off a challenger title, which is, solid form. And although it does feel like something that does come up most Grand Slams, we had, Novak cut one of his sessions short in the lead up due to some neck issues. So we'll see how he looks first up on court. But yeah, it has the makings of an interesting match, because I don't think Martinez is just going to roll over. It should make for some some interesting viewing. And then over on John Cain, it's the back-to-back Aussie night session. So hopefully Tom Yanovich has recovered from her back issue that caused her to retire in Adelaide last week. But Alexei Popyrin and Alexandra Muller is a really interesting match of two players who probably aren't in the best form, but it'd be interesting to see what the crowd can bring to that one as well.
I'll just go down here. Any interesting late matches on the outer courts?
I mean, I'm not the American on the show, but Jovic versus Volinets is something that probably catches my eye a little bit. You know, Jovic coming off a loss in the final in Hobart, so curious to see how he responds after a busy start to the Auckland Hobart, making deep runs at both of those. So interested to see how she goes there in the All American battle. Davidovich Fekina to see how he looks. Coming off another almost but not quite a title, or almost not quite a final in Adelaide, losing to Humbert.
I think I was on the right side of that one.
You were. I certainly was not.
Going under talked about, Steve, because he hasn't talked about how much longer he's playing, or at least set a final date, and that's Roberto Bautista Agut, second on court 8. This is a really tough matchup. He's a heavy underdog against Jerry Shung, and not out of the realm of possibilities. This is his last Australia.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing of, RBA's rankings falling into that kind of pocket where he's not far off needing to qualify for these kind of tournaments. I don't think he's quite the draw to, be earning a wild card. So big opportunity, I think, for him to, try and cause an upset, particularly in the heat of the day, with Jerry coming off not a lot of tennis, but, some improved tennis. But, you wonder if it's going to come down to whether the best of 5 is still an advantage for the Spaniard or not at this stage of his career.
All right. Last couple courts here, 15 and 14. Munar Svrčina has a chance to be a complete sideshow, I feel. A real struggle to hold fest, especially later on in the day. I don't think helps Svrčina at all. And I don't want to say it plays into Munar's hands more, but I definitely lean a later start time helping Munar more than it helps Svrčina.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of water's gone under the bridge since these two met here in 2023. So I think that we might see a reversal of that match. That match result where Svrčina, I think, won in straight sets. So looking for Munar, we spoke about him in the off season in terms of his improved 2025 form. It's a big opportunity, like a decent matchup, I think, for him first up here, albeit out on court 15. I think Carolina Mahova is probably a bit hard done by as well, sitting out on court 14 as a former Grand Slam finalist and very, very capable, competent player. When you look at what her CV stacks up compared to the rest out here on these courts.
Good chance for people to see Budkov Kjær, the young Norwegian who qualified in, take on Riley Opelka. Points are going to be quick, so it could be a short-ish match. But even with the small window, good opportunity to see him.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Steve. Well, actually, hold on. I missed this Battle of Americans, Learn Etienne and Marcos Giron. I don't know if you know this, Steve, but Marcos Giron has played the best tennis of his life going into this event. He's red hot. He got breadstick the other day, but he's red hot.
It's genuinely going to be one of the more interesting matches today. I think Bernard, for whatever, whether it's the post next gen fatigue that came in Brisbane, he didn't look anywhere near his best. But this is going to be an interesting test for Lerner, I think, over the best of 5. And then I don't know if you saw, if you have subscribed to our YouTube channel, put a quick short up about Alicia Pax versus Alex Yala as well there on court 6. I think it'll be interesting to see. We're talking about crowd support. I think Yala will have a fair few fans at her back if the last couple of weeks have been any indication through the other tournaments that she's been at.
They say that the transcript of your YouTube can help your algorithm and bring more eyeballs. So, in the spirit of that, Steve, I'll just say Alexiala, 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 Alexiala. Oh man, she moves units. I don't know if you saw that meme on. It wasn't a meme. I mean, it was a screenshot of the YouTube for the press conferences, in which she had 100x every other player. What a superstar in the making. Go ahead.
Yeah, the advantage is though, like this is actually a really interesting match, and that's why I did want to quickly chat about it. Is that it's one of those, you know, I feel like I've seen a lot of context and description of the Mpechi Pericard versus Baez contrast in form. Well, this I think is the WTA equivalent for round one with Parks and Yala. So interesting match. It'd be great to see. I think Yala pull through and continue her strong start to 2026.
All right, I'll round up the finish by saying my upset pick from our draw preview show is last on court with Bellucci taking on Casper Ruud. I don't love that time for Bellucci, but would be a nice time for Casper Ruud to wake up, get a good night's sleep, and catch the first flight out of the country as well. So we shall see. It's going to be exciting. I mentioned we'll save day 3. We'll keep it just to day 2. I'll get this up quickly so people will have some time to watch. And do like and subscribe. Give us a comment. What are you looking forward to today, day 2? What are you liking so far at the Australian Open? What are you not liking so far? You know, I totally missed the whole actual big story here in the States, and that is how everyone is ready to go with pitchforks to ESPN to protest ESPN Unlimited, which is actual insanity. And we'll save that for the next one and keep this one short. But thank you, everyone, if you made it here.